Hello everyone. In today's session of Technical English Communication, we shall be taking a look at an important study skill, note making or note taking. Before we get into today's session, let me give you a brief overview of the contents of today's session. I shall be discussing briefly on what I mean by note making or note taking, why is it such an important skill, how to do note making, and we will end the session by looking at a couple of examples of doing note making and note taking. So let's get going. What do we mean by note taking or note making? When we say note making, what we mean is making notes while looking at printed matter. And when I say note taking, what I mean is making notes while listening to a lecture or an academic session or presentation. So note taking is related with listening and note making is related with reading. So when we say note making or note taking, we mean it is a method, a study skill, a method of writing down quickly, very briefly and clearly the key concepts or points, whether of a lecture, a research paper if we are reading, a presentation or a book. So wouldn't you all agree that this is an important skill for all of you to master? This is not only going to help you in your academics as a student, but it will also help you once you get to your workplace tomorrow when you are attending business meetings, conferences, or making important presentations, or even trying to understand the client requirements while attending to a telephone call. Note making and note taking skills are not only essential for your immediate student career, but also it is going to be a lifelong skill which will help you in your progression once you get into your working environment. So, why should we take notes or make notes? What happens if we don't do it? Let me give you an interesting story before or a narrative before I get into the discussion. Last week, the civil services results were out, and this year's topper from Andhra Pradesh, joint Andhra Pradesh and Telangana was one of my students, Mr. M. Surya Teja, who got 76th rank in UPSC this year. So I rang him up to congratulate him on his achievement, and during the course of interviewing him, I asked him, Surya Teja, how was it possible for you to crack the UPSC exam? I believe you had to pore over voluminous books, attend to long lectures during the coaching hours. How did you master so much of content, and how did you remember it when you were writing the UPSC prelims exam and later the mains exam and also attending the interview? Didn't you find it challenging? And he told me, yes madam, but before we got into the preparation for UPSC, in my early days, I was coached on how to do note taking and note making. That study skill proved to be extremely critical for my success. So he said that as a civil services aspirant, he had to refer to multiple sources in order to do his preparation. He had to listen to long hours of lectures during his coaching to master the content. Being an engineering student, he was trying to master humanities subjects. So he had to listen to long lectures and make voluminous notes. And he says that after 3 hours of lecture, I was advised by my mentor to distill it down to one page, one A4 size page notes, so that it becomes manageable for me and I can use that notes as ready reference later when I want to develop my essay or when I want to develop my notes for attending the interview. This is what he had to say. So, I am not speaking only about UPSC, even for your regular weekly assignments, your mid-exams or even your semester end exams, I am sure that this skill is going to be extremely handy for all of you in doing well in your exams and securing top grades. So, we should make notes for two reasons. Note making or note taking essentially has two functions. One is it is a process function and another is it is a product function. So, what do I mean by process function? So, when you are listening to long lectures or reading long content in your textbooks, standard textbooks on a given topic, how do you know that you are able to understand it? How do you know that you are processing the information and crystallizing it into easy and simplified content which you can use for ready reference tomorrow when you have to write your exams? Obviously, as a student, all your notes is directed towards preparing for the exams later and preparing probably for your campus interviews later. So, if this notes that you make it doesn't come handy for you, there is no point in making notes at all. So, note making or note taking has these two broad functions. Processing. So, when you are reading a text, how will you know that you are processing the information correctly? Unless you are able to distill it down to a set of key points, key words or key concepts that you have gleaned from the text that you have read. After attending to a lecture, you should know how to encapsulate the highlights of the lecture in key points, and this is very important. So, processing of information is done only by actively listening and jotting down the points simultaneously. This helps you to comprehend the information that is being transacted in the classroom. Otherwise, most of it, generally as students, we know that we have to attend for an hour's lecture and we start off with good intentions very often, and after 10 minutes of listening to the lecture, our mind begins to wander. We take a vacation, our mind takes a vacation and it gets preoccupied with something else, and a good part of the lecture gets missed. So, taking notes helps you to keep engaged with the lecture, keeps your focus intact, prevents you from getting digressed or distracted from what is being delivered to you. So, it instills some sense of discipline so that while you are listening to the lecture and jotting down the key points, your mind is kept engaged with what you are listening and your mind is processing all the information that it is listening to. So, this is what we mean by a process function. Likewise, when you are reading a text, if you are reading an article, a journal article, while reading, if you are simultaneously making notes, you are confident that you are processing the information and no important point is escaping your attention. So, this is an important thing to remember, that when you speak about note making or note taking, it is helping you to process the information, comprehend it and assimilate the information for later reference. Then, it is also a product function. When I say product function, what do I mean? That after listening to the 1 hour lecture, I have distilled down the lecture to a set of 7 or 8 key points, and this is the product or this is the notes that is extremely valuable to me, and I have this stored away for future reference or future recall of the lecture contents. So, not only the means of preparing the notes, but the end product is equally important, and this helps your mind to grapple with the information when it is very complex for you to understand it at one go. So, this is an important thing for all of you to bear in mind. After going home, you should immediately look at your notes and you should try to keep the notes beside you and refer to a standard book and see if you can fill any gaps so as you can reconstruct a summary out of it and put it away for later reference when you will need it to prepare for your mid exams or for reference for any kind of lab practical work that you may want to do later on it. So how to make notes? This is another thing that we need to understand. So there is no one standard method for making notes, I would say, because making notes is very personalized skill. How to make notes also depends upon your individual style of understanding or assimilating the content. But apart from that, making or taking notes also depends upon the nature of the subject that you are studying and the nature of the information or the knowledge that is being imparted to you through the lecture or through the paper or article. So, for example, if you are talking about is the subject highly concept oriented or is the subject that you are listening to, the lecture you are listening to is highly information oriented. For instance, if we are talking about, let's say, history, a subject like history is full of dates, full of important figures, people to remember. So you may make notes that is information oriented. So for example, if you want to, let's say if you are talking about India's colonial history or freedom struggle, then you may say something like, okay, you may make a timeline. You may say, okay, 1498, advent of Portuguese, or you may say Vasco da Gama came to India for easy reference. So 1498, 1600, East India Company came to India. So East India Company of India came and established its first factory in Surat around 1600. Then you may want to, so you'll make a timeline, right? You will say later, okay, 1757 or before that you had the Battle of Plassey, you had the Battle of Buxar, then you had the Sepoy Mutiny, and so on. So a subject like history will require you to include lot of dates. There is a timeline involved. So when you make your lecture notes, okay, you have to be clear what is the nature of the subject, and based on that what kind of information or what kind of notes to make. So here clearly the dates are very important. But if you are talking about physics, then it is a highly concept oriented subject. So there your information is more to do with abstract terms and understanding phenomena. So then you will adopt a different style of making notes. So then you will put the words keywords, isn't it? And you will put these keywords together and later you will construct the notes. So you will, if you are listening to a physics lecture on light, okay, you may say focal length and your foci and things like that, isn't it? So you will jot down the key points, you will use notations, you will use abbreviations, and you will try to establish interconnections between the different terms also. So how to make notes depends upon first your personal style of processing the information and distilling it to suit your needs, because it should be very personalized. This note should be useful to you. This notes is not going to be consumed by someone else. It is for your consumption, for your preparation, for an exam or for an assignment or for an interview later. So you should personalize it, but try to make notes in a simplified way so that the notes gives you only the broad points and does not in verbatim produce every single point that is being uttered by the lecturer in the classroom. Or you don't jot down every single idea that you come across the text in the text. So please keep these things in mind. So what to write? We were just discussing. Don't be verbatim. Avoid being verbatim. Don't take down content word for word. Okay? Try to be choosy in taking or making your notes. Jot down the key concepts. When you're reading, jot down, underline the key concepts and make a note of it so that you can later build on that. Jot down main concepts and ideas or bits of information. Use keywords, phrases and information that is something that is relevant or new to you. Okay, it should be something that is familiar, not something that you have already read about or you already know. Try to include bits of information that you need to refer to later, which is something unfamiliar to you, or jot down those points which are relevant to the topic under discussion. Don't take information that is irrelevant. Sometimes in the lecture, the teacher may give you some examples, some analogies just to make a point clear. But the example may be very general and it may not be useful for you to build your answer later. So in such cases, you may allow such examples to pass. But if you feel it is a technical example and mentioning the example in your answer will help to better explain the concept you are attempting to explain, it is worth noting it down. So you have to be selective. You should be discriminating in the way you listen and you glean your notes. Your notes should not be like another textbook, or it should not be as voluminous as the original text, whether a lecture or whether a reading text that you have referred to. It should distill down and it should reduce it to a manageable level so that it is available for you for later quick reference. So as I said, note making or note taking is basically a study skill. You are taking large chunks of information and trying to reduce it to its essence so that this will help you to build your essay or your answer later. That is a very important thing to remember. So when you are making notes, be choosy and select what you want to jot down so that you are able to use that as an outline to develop your answer later. And how to write? This is a very important thing. Follow the 4R method. What do we mean by 4 R's? Record. Listening or reading, record what you are processing, the information you are reading and processing with your mind. Record it. How will you record it? By reducing it. Cut all the flab. Cut all the inessential elements of the reading text or the not so important points that the lecturer is making, just to underscore or highlight the point he or she is trying to reinforce to you. So reduce the content to manageable level so that your mind is able to understand it and remember it for a long time. Also recite it. Reciting it means rephrase it in your own words. Don't use exactly the same words as the original text. That defeats the purpose. If you are going to, as I said, don't repeat them in verbatim. Recite it, rephrase it, or we also call this a skill as paraphrasing. That means the complex concept can be put together in simpler words for your own understanding with your own vocabulary. Don't try to use exactly the same terms. Then that defeats the purpose, as I said. And review. Once you have written your notes, just don't put it away. It would be a good idea for you to revisit the notes on the same day that you made it. Suppose you make a notes on 4G computers or microprocessors after listening to the lecture. Go home, keep a standard textbook beside you, put these notes beside it, and then reading and processing, try to again fine-tune your notes, prepare an outline with examples so that this notes is mastered by you. Your mind is able to grasp it, comprehend this information, and it is kept for later reference. So it is essential that you understand it. For instance, you may use lot of abbreviations, you may use lot of symbols, you may use examples, but if you don't revise it and you don't fine tune or fair up your notes on the same day, what will happen is you yourself may not be able to comprehend your notes when you refer to it after a week or 10 days time, because by then all the things that you listened to in the class would have been forgotten. So please keep this in mind. Review your notes at the earliest. Review your notes and make your notes complete, bridging any small gaps that might be there. Keep this thing in mind. And use a holistic approach. What do I mean by holistic approach or a macro view? I mean, don't get stuck with any one small point. Take a broad overview of what is the content that you are reading or that you are listening to. That means you should have a broad-based understanding. What is the relevance of that particular concept that you are learning in the overall scheme of the subject? And you should have a bird's eye view of the, suppose there is a 1 hour lecture, what was it that was covered? The teacher was covering about the evolution of microprocessors from the 2G to the 3G to the 4G and so on. So when these kind of evolutionary trends were discussed, you have to jot down the key points. Later you may have to write a full-fledged paper on that as an assignment. So take a macro view, take a broad-based view, and don't look at only small details, but look at the complete picture. That will help you to assimilate what you are listening to or reading in a much more lucid way. Write your notes in a logical pattern with headings, subheadings, examples and so on. So try to follow some certain systematic approach. Try to have some logic to the way you jot down your notes, because how you prepare your notes will also reflect in the way you develop your answer later. If you write without any particular organized style, later your answer will also look very, very confused and it will be missing out on the clarity. So you should know exactly the different key components of that particular subject, that particular unit. You should know what are the key points, what are the sub-points, what are the examples or analogies which will help you to explain that key points or sub-points or illustrate it and so on. So if you systematically organize your notes, this will be reflected in the systematic development of your essay when you are going to write your mid-exam or your semester-end exam. The way you prepare your notes will also be reflecting in your grades. If you write in a haphazard way without following a particular scientific approach or method of organizing your information, this could probably add to your confusion. Instead of making the subject easy and lucid, it will in fact make it more complicated, and it will really not help you even if you make notes in that manner. And as I already mentioned, adopt your own personalized style. Have your own touch in the way you make your notes. Use your own abbreviations, diagrams, use your own symbols, anything that works for you and that helps you to quickly jot down the notes. Now, when you do that, what happens? It makes the whole subject familiar to you, and you feel that you have mastered the content because you have processed it and put it in a language, deconstructed it and put it in a language that you understand, your mind can grasp comfortably. So as I said, use abbreviations. So try to use, you have standard abbreviations, but you can use your own abbreviations as well. For instance, when you are studying science subjects, volume can go VOL. Usually you just say USU approximately. So you see how I am chopping it out. Somebody can become SB, especially can become ESP. I'm sure you all use this already in your SMS language or in the social media. So oxygen O, pages PP, so kilogram kg, you're already using. So with effect from WEF and so on. So specific gravity, SG. So these are things that you are already using as a part of your science subjects. And use your own symbols as well. Use symbols, signs that work for you. For instance, at the rate of, or for example, we can say therefore. So we say, okay, therefore, when we say because, okay, so these are some examples we use, isn't it? Euro, dollar, not equal to, isn't it? When we want to say not equal to, we put it this way. Infinity, we put a loop. So all these are already known to you. Plus, minus, okay? And if we say greater than, less than, all these symbols are known to us. Or if we say a house, we just put a house symbol. That is simple, right? And when we say increasing, decreasing, these are all some symbols or signs that we tend to use when we are writing our notes very quickly while the lecture is going on, so as to save time. We can also use schematic or diagrammatic representation. For instance, in your science class, if you are discussing the hydrological cycle, the water cycle, you may just use a diagram like this, isn't it? You can just say, okay, this is the first step, this is the second step, this is how, okay, water circulates, isn't it? The first step is the evaporation, then comes the condensation, precipitation, comes the rain, and then the flow distribution, again evaporation, and so on. So we try to reduce huge amount of information into a simple diagram. So just the diagram helps us to understand the process behind the hydrological cycle. So, what are some of the methods or ways of preparing notes? So these are some of the common methods that are used all over the world. Different kinds of texts will demand you to use different kinds of styles. For example, you can use, when you are reading a text, you may use the annotative style. That means you have a text, you are reading, in the margin you can make notes, scribble notes there itself. You can distill a large chunk of information with just one key idea written in the margin. That is one way, that is called annotation. Commenting on the text that you are reading, keeping a. Now if you are doing it digitally, this method is extremely amenable. When you type down your, when you read a text, if you download a PDF copy or if you download a Word document, you can extend the column, okay, on the left side, and you can make a column, and you can keep making your notes and remarks on the main text that you are reading. You can open an edit box and you can write the comments or remarks. That is one way of annotating a text. Outline. You can use an outline. That means, as I was just telling you, so Indian National Movement, INM. So I've used an abbreviation. Then what did I say? Started with 1498. Then I said, this is just an outline. So East India Company, 1600, Portuguese. Then I have said Battle of Plassey. Then I have said Battle of Buxar. Then I have said Sepoy Mutiny, 1857, Sepoy Mutiny, okay, and so on. So I have, when I have written it this way, Indian National Movement, India Independence Movement, what have I said? I have put an abbreviation. I put the date, I put the advent of the Portuguese. East India Company came in 1600. Battle of Plassey happened next. Battle of Buxar. With Battle of Buxar, they conquered Bengal. Okay, and then 1757, Sepoy Mutiny happened. And then I can also write here. So when I leave a column notes, I can write, okay, here, Battle of Buxar, so Sirajuddaulah, okay, conquered. Sepoy Mutiny, Rani Lakshmi Bai. Mangal Pandey, Tatya Tope, and so on. So I can parallelly denote the outline in such a way that it includes both the time frame and the key protagonists involved in that movement. So this will help in reconstructing my notes in a more lucid and comprehensive way later. I can use this outline. Column notes. So column notes, I am sure all of you are already familiar because you are using it in your subjects like mathematics and physics, where there are a lot of derivations involved. Then you can use mind maps. You can use mind maps where without following any particular order, you are just using a spider diagram to make. I will just give you a visual representation. And where all these methods don't work, you can just make a brief summary in a text notes. So these are some of the ways of making notes. So annotation, here is an example of annotation. Here is a text and then in the margin I am making my notes. So this method is called annotation and it is suitable for printed materials, okay, where we make notes in the margins and it helps us to make notes and remember the key points, the main points without having to reread the whole text. So before, if I am making notes in my textbook, just before, a day before the exam, I will just flip the pages and I will just keep looking at the comments or the notes I have made, annotations I have made in the margin beside the printed text. Just by looking at those outlines, I will be able to reconstruct and be able to develop my whole essay. In the outline notes, I just gave you an example. We usually put information in a sequential way. If you like, you can also do some numbering. So 1 and ABC. So under each heading, you can have subheadings and then you can put different points in that manner. Column notes, as I already said, these are suitable for subjects which have lot of notations, lot of derivations or mathematical formulae. For example, look at this index and logarithm. So here I have used the column method. This is suitable for subjects like these, like mathematics. And as I already said, summary method where you cannot make any other kind of notes, then you will read a large chunk and you will just write a small paragraph encapsulating the essence of the paragraph. So when you will do this when you cannot impose headings or subheadings. The text is not suitable for breaking it down into headings or subheadings. And as I already mentioned, this is a method, mind maps, where there is lot of information and it is mostly related to ideas, where ideas are interlinked or even bits of information. For example, you want to show the relationship between the different ideas. So you want to synthesize ideas and you want to establish the interconnectivity between different concepts or ideas. For example, underwater cameras, they are the regular kind and the amphibians. Amphibious are again of two kinds, Nikomos and snapshot. So here, see how it is. This simple schematic, diagrammatic way encapsulates the information and you can develop a whole paragraph about the different kinds of cameras. Likewise, here if we are talking about information skills, how can we do it? So this is again another mind map. Now, when you are making notes from printed matter, you must understand what are the objectives of making these notes. Why are you making the notes after reading a textbook? Obviously, you are making these notes so that you can have quick reference when you need it before the final exam. Let's say for a course like embedded systems, you are prescribed 4 reference books. Obviously, a day before the exam, you cannot possibly read all the 4 books, right? You need to have some manageable content that will help you to recall the entire subject before you go for the exam. So, for the rest of the semester, every day you will read 1 unit and you will reduce it to half a page notes covering the key points and the key concepts, key phrases. So that this notes put together, the entire textbook that you have read will come distilled down to 2 or 3 pages or 4 pages covering the key points and the key elements of that subject. So, when you understand the objectives, you can read the whole topic, then summarize, and when you are making your notes, try to have some column space, some margin space where you can add some updates, any other kind of additions or deletions or comments you want to post later, and you can from time to time keep improving these notes till the end of the semester by adding more. But remember, whenever you make notes, try to paraphrase, use your own words, write the things that you understood in your own language so that it becomes useful to you before the exam. Now, if you write simply the concepts and the language, same language you transfer into your notes, it's not going to help you to understand it. Unless you write it in your own words, it won't become, the subject clarity will not happen. You will not get the conceptual clarity to be able to explain it when you are rewriting about that particular subject in your text, in your later exam. So, and if you are adding some of your own comments that are not there in the original text, you can put it in inverted commas and add your own personal comments. And after making your notes, try to read your own notes to make sure that you have understood and you have not missed out on any of the key points. And as I said, when you are listening to the lecture, listening and taking notes, identify, as I said, have the macro view. Look at the holistic picture and take noteworthy matter, okay, materials, identify the noteworthy materials or points, and don't simply jot down everything that you listen to. And write down important details like dates, time, and so on. And identify key issues. Okay, write about key issues or phrases by noting down the keywords. And keep some space, and wherever appropriate to save time, especially when you are listening and making notes, you need to be really fast. So, you use your own abbreviations so that you don't miss out on any part of the lecture. So, once again, and here are some logical methods in which you can, some logic to the way you can develop your notes. For example, when you are organizing your notes or your points, you can follow certain arrangement. You can talk about past to the present. For instance, when you are talking about evolution of microprocessors, 2G microprocessor to 4G or 5G. So, that means here there is from the past to the present. So, you are making a timeline and you are talking about 2G and the key points, key features of 2G microprocessors, 3G and the key points and so on. So, past to the present, this is the arrangement in which you have put the content. I was just giving you an example from history, 1498 to India's freedom achievement in 1947. So, 1498 to 1947, the key highlights of the Indian national movement are given in the form of a timeline. So, past to the present, this is how you may organize your content depending upon the relevant subject. Or you may talk about, let's say we are trying to, the teacher is explaining to you the cement manufacturing process. There is a process involved and the key stages or key steps in the processing of the cement. So, there may be some steps or stages involved in a process. So, again you will have you can do it in a schematic way. Step 1, step 2, you can have a flow chart or you can have an outline way of mentioning this. And you can have another method of organizing your points from the most important points to the least important ones, or from well-known ideas to less familiar or less well-known ideas, or from simple concepts to complex ideas. You can have a certain scheme or certain arrangement, a linear arrangement, simple to complex, past to present, first stage to the last stage, or important points to the least important points, general to the specific, largest. If you are describing a machine, the inside of a machine, you are asked to give a description of let's say a 3-stroke engine. So, when you are describing the 3-stroke engine or 2-stroke engine, then You may start with description of the large parts of the machine, engine first, and then go to the smaller parts, less significant parts. So from the big parts to the small parts. Or you may have, if you are talking about a problem versus a solution and a solution, you may describe the problem and then talk about the solution. This is how you organize your notes. Or a cause and an effect or a result kind of relationship. So this is how there is some logic, and this logic is essential for you to capture when the notes is being taken down while listening to a lecture or reading a text. So now let us take up a few examples. The first example, here is a small paragraph. Let's see how we can make a note on that. Geology is the science comprising the study of solid earth, the rocks of which it is composed, and the processes by which they change. Geology can also refer generally to the study of the solid features of any celestial body, such as the geology of the moon or Mars. Imagine that this is the text given to you and you have to make a note on that. If you are, let's say you are reading it and you want to distill it to or condense it to a set of manageable points for you to use later. How will you write? Heading, geology. And what is this? This is a definition of geology. So what is geology? A study of, and the subcomponents. What are the subcomponents? Study of solid earth, rocks, processes, and then in the second part of the definition, also the study of solid features of any celestial body. So these many elements are there. So study of number one, solid earth, rocks, processes of change in the earth's surface, solid features of any celestial body like the satellites or other planets. So this way you will, if you can just keep this in mind, it will help you to write a definition in the exam. You don't have to blindly memorize it, right? So this is a, I would say, a good example of how a note is made of a complex definition by breaking it down into its subunits so that it is easy for recall later. Take the second example. Studies on worldwide literacy rates show that almost 80% of the world's population over the age of 15 is now literate. This includes more women than ever before. Now let's imagine if you want to represent this part in the form of a note, how will you do it? So see, worldwide literacy. What have I done here? Worldwide, WW. So worldwide, if it depends on the context. If I am talking about World War, I may use World War I, World War II. If I am using it in a history lesson, World War, WW could also mean World War. But in the context of literacy survey, the word WW means worldwide. Literacy, see RT, rate. So how have I said? Worldwide literacy rate. And then is equal to, I have used a symbol here, is equal to almost 80% of world population. So I haven't written population in the full form. I have said POP. So I have condensed it to suit my reference later. Over 15 years, now literate. So I have said all the population which is over 15 years is now literate. So 80% of the world population. So see, a big chunk of information I have distilled it into a phrase, a fragment of a sentence. And the second part, this includes more women than before. So greater and hash. I have used hash. Hash could also refer to number. This is a symbol we commonly use to refer to number. So greater number of women than before. I haven't written before completely, BEF. I have used the fragment of it. So this is again a good example. So such a big chunk of information is just put in small manageable phrase or sentence. So look at the third example. UNESCO study shows a drop in illiteracy from 22% of the world population in 1995 to 20% in 2000. Now see how I have said. UNESCO shows a drop in illiteracy. So illiteracy, worldwide population, and what did I say? There are two time frames here, 1995 and 2000. And what is the drop? From 22% to 20%. So 1995, 2000, 22%, 20%. See, I have brought it down to such a simple way of representing. And this makes it easy for me to remember. This is a good mnemonic device, a good memory aid. So this is how we will reduce the large chunk of information into manageable note. Now, let's take a bigger example here. I will read it, please follow it. I don't know whether if this is readable from your end, but please follow me as I read it. Underwater cameras, this is the article about. Regular cameras obviously will not function underwater unless specially protected. Though housings are available for waterproofing 35 mm and roll film cameras, a few special models are amphibious. They can be used above or below the water. Most of these cameras are snapshot models, but one, Nikona, is a true 35 mm system camera. Though lenses and film must be changed on the surface, the camera will otherwise function normally at depths down to 70 mm. 4 lenses are available. 2 of these, which have focal lengths of 90 mm and 35 mm, will function in air and water. The other 2 of them, which have focal length of 90 mm and 35 mm, will function in air and water. The other 2, the 28 and 15 mm lenses, work only underwater lenses, are also available from other manufacturers. So this is an example of the kind of models that are available for use using underwater cameras. So, and some classification of cameras, those cameras which can work only above the ground, some which can work in water, and some which can work in both water and open, so terrestrial. So here, see how this big chunk of information has been using the outline method, how it has been schematically represented. And the heading is underwater cameras. And then it says regular cameras, amphibious cameras. So the text talks about the distinction, the difference between regular cameras which work on land and those which work in both on land and in water. So regular cameras, amphibious cameras. Regular cameras, they are used in special housing necessary. Okay, so they are fixed in houses and they are used for surveillance. Okay, like in your CC cameras. And amphibious cameras are those which are again come in 2 models, snapshot models and Nikonos models, which are of 35 mm configuration. Then what about the lens of amphibious cameras? Then another feature is discussed in the second part of the text, lenses, air and water 35 mm and 90 mm. And second point is only underwater 28 mm and 15 mm. So this is how the whole big chunk of information is just using the outline method is just represented with the key points. And just looking at this, you can reconstruct this whole text in your own words. This is a beautiful example of note making. Now, this is another example for you. I will skip that. We can give it to you as a handout so that you can do it on your own. Now, let us do a note-taking exercise. This is a written transcript of a lecture, of a spoken text. I'll just read it for you. I hope it is visible. Listening text. So, someone is lecturing it this way. Okay, let me tell you, the composition of milk is influenced by many factors. Yeah, these factors include breed, also the genetic constitution of the cow, the individual cow, and not to be overlooked, the intervals between the milkings, since the last milk to be drawn at each milking is richer in fat than the rest. The completeness of milking additionally influences the composition of the sample. Well, basically those are the main factors, but we can add to them the age of the cow, the stage of lactation, and should there be any certain disease conditions. These should be about the more common factors affecting the composition of milk. A final point I want to make clear is general. The kind of feed has only a slight effect on the composition of milk. However, feed of poor quality and insufficient quantity, again, poor quality feed and insufficient quantity cause both low yield and insufficient percentage of non-fat solids. This is a lecture given on what contributes to good quality milk, or how the feed and other factors affect the quality of milk. Now let's see, this is you can see this is a spoken text. So lot of fillers are there. This is how a lecture goes on in the real time situation. Now, if you are listening to this text, how will you listen actively and how will you glean the key points from this text? Let us look at it. So I have highlighted the key points in white. See, what are the key points from the previous text that you can take away from here? The composition of milk, the keyword, influenced by the factors, another key point, key phrase, and these factors, what are the factors? Number one, breed. What is the breed of the cow? The genetic constitution of the cow, of the individual cow, and the intervals between the milking, and the completeness of milking, whether you are milking thoroughly or you are milking only halfway and then leaving it. And then, of course, the age of the cow, how old is the cow, the stage of lactation. So from when is the cow, okay, after the gestation period, after the calf is born, how long does the cow give milk? There is some time stipulation. So what is the stage of lactation in which the cow is? And the final point, see, there are some verbal cues. The kind of feed and the kind of, when we talk of the feed, the quantity and the quality and the quantity of the feed can affect the quality of the milk. These are the key points. See, so now from this entire text I have only jotted down some key ideas. Composition of milk. So you know that this whole text, this whole lecture is about composition of milk. And what are the factors that affect the composition of the milk? The breed of the cow, the age of the cow, how old is the cow, what is the lactation stage in which the cow is, and what is the manner in which you are milking the cow, and then the quality of the feed you are giving it and the quantity of the feed. All these factors go on to affect the quality of the milk produced or yielded by the cow. So see, here I have finally distilled it down to this set of points. Common factors influencing composition of milk. The first factor is breed. Second factor is the genetic constitution of the cow. What is the genetic, the pedigree or the heredity of the cow, and how much interval is given between different milkings. Then the age of the cow, the lactation stage in which the cow is, since when it has been giving milk after the gestation period. Is the cow affected by any disease conditions? And what is the kind of feed that is given? And the speaker says that it only has slight effect on the milk quality. What effects? But however, there is some effect of the quality of the feed and the quantity of the feed. So if there is non-fat solids, then it may give poor yield of milk. So this is how you distill that. This large chunk of information is distilled into a set of points where I have just put down the key points. So this is how you will do the note making. I hope that this session is useful to you. But before we wrap up today's session, let us once again have a quick recap on what you should do when you are talking about note making or note taking. Yes, note taking or note making, setting the stage. That means getting ready to do active listening or active reading. If it is a note taking, then it is a lecture you are listening to. So listen actively, prepare the stage, prepare your mind to listen, or prepare your mind to read get engaged with the printed text. Then bring the right material. See that when you are reading the text or listening to the lecture, you should have the material. You should have a note pad to jot down your notes. Then listen actively, apply to the text, listen actively or read actively while preparing your notes. And format and structure your notes using appropriate schematizing devices like an outline, a mind map, a column format, annotative method, depending upon which kind of text and what is the subject that you are applying yourself to. So use appropriate formatting and structuring methods. If you feel there is a timeline involved, you can use the outline method. If you feel that there is some different ideas are being discussed with relation to a topic, use the mind map method. If you are talking about a complex set of equations or derivations, use the column method. So what is the method you need to apply will depend upon the nature of the subject and the content that is being shared with you. Then use the outline method, use pictures and diagrams wherever possible. And if the teacher is talking too fast, you can just switch on your phone and record the talk and then make notes later. That is also another. Use note taking and note making using abbreviations, symbols, okay, and some signaling expressions. This will help you to organize your notes in a very logical way. And so on the whole, note taking and note making are very beneficial to all of you. Please keep this in mind. Note taking and note making is essential because it helps you to deconstruct large chunks of information from multiple sources and simplify it, okay, this complex chunk of information or knowledge, and reduce it down to its essential components. Then note making and note taking helps you develop the ability to prepare well organized and comprehensive and meaningful study material, and it makes you more active as a learner. And this useful study skill helps you to save your time, and for when you are doing it on a regular basis, it is a great time saving device, because when you are going for that final exam where you have to manage the entire subject and you hardly have any time between one exam and another exam, this kind of distilled notes reduced to its essence in an outline form or in a minimized form will be extremely handy for your preparation. I would advise all of you on a day-to-day basis, when you make this outline method, reduce your entire lecture to a foolscap paper, write it on a foolscap paper, take a picture, a photo of that, keep it in your phone, and while you're commuting in your bus, you can open that and you can keep referring to it from time to time. Many of you are now accustomed to using the handheld devices like phones and laptops. So take a picture and keep it away. And this repository of notes will become extremely handy for you for preparing even for the most complex subjects, and you will be amazed at the way your grades improve in your class. And as I already said, this is essential for a whole host of activities, for preparing for tests, preparing for assignments, projects, later when you get to your workplace, presentations, meetings, etc. And most importantly, this skill, once mastered, is going to help you in your lifelong learning. Because once you get to the workplace, today you know, all of you as technical graduates, technologies keep changing, and by the time you graduate, new technologies, new tools, new methods, new processes will be in implementation in the industry. So you have to learn on the job and regularly keep updating yourself. So this way of doing note making and note taking will prove to be extremely valuable for you as a skill to develop and grow professionally once you step out of this institution. So We will do some more practice of note making and note taking with the help of handouts in our interactive discussion. I hope that today's session was practical and useful to all of you, and you got a fair idea of how to do note making. We will give you some more examples in our interactive sessions. Thank you all for your attention.